The weight of the silver tray pressed against my calloused palms as I navigated through the maze of tables. Midnight at Carluccio's meant dim lighting, hushed conversations, and the constant scent of expensive cologne mixing with garlic and truffle oil. My black uniform clung to my back, damp with sweat despite the restaurant's aggressive air conditioning. 3 double shifts in a row had left my vision occasionally blurring at the edges, dark spots dancing like unwelcome party guests. "Table 7 is still waiting for their Barolo," Marco hissed as I passed the service station, not bothering to look up from his phone. As assistant manager, his primary skill seemed to be pointing out my shortcomings. "I know," I whispered, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, just delivering these appetizers first. My apartment rent was due tomorrow. The electricity had been shut off last week, and somewhere across town, my younger sister was probably wondering why I hadn't answered her texts about needing money for textbooks. The familiar weight of responsibility pressed against my chest, heavier than any tray I'd ever carried. I didn't notice him at first. Table 12 had been empty all evening, reserved but unoccupied. The kind of table Marco made sure remained pristine, just in case. Now, as I carefully arranged prosciutto-wrapped figs and arancini before a group of chattering businessmen, I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. A prickle ran down my spine, and I instinctively glanced toward the corner of the restaurant. The man sat alone, perfectly still in the shadowed booth, one hand resting on the white tablecloth. Even in profile, there was something magnetic about him. The sharp line of his jaw, the precision with which his midnight blue suit hugged broad shoulders. He couldn't have been more than 35, yet everything about him radiated authority. 2 men in dark suits stood nearby, not even pretending to be anything but guards, their eyes constantly scanning the restaurant. I quickly looked away, but not before noticing how his presence seemed to alter the very air of the room, like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. "Earth to Emma," snapped one of the businessmen, snapping his fingers inches from my face. "More wine, sweetheart. Or are you too busy daydreaming?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I'm sorry, sir." Right away. As I hurried back toward the bar, I felt Marco's hand grip my elbow, his fingernails digging into my skin. "Do you have any idea who just walked in?" he whispered, eyes wide with panic. "That's Alessio Russo, the Alessio Russo." The name meant nothing to me. "I'm sorry, should I know?" "Jesus Christ, Emma. He owns half the waterfront. His family has been running." Marco cut himself off, glancing nervously toward table 12. He's important. Very important. And he asked for our best server." His lips twisted into what might have been an attempt at a smile. "So, unfortunately, that's you tonight. Don't screw this up." My stomach clenched as Marco thrust a wine list into my trembling hands. He's waiting. The distance to table 12 felt endless. Each step brought me closer to the man whose mere presence had turned Marco, perpetually condescending Marco, into a nervous wreck. The wine list shook slightly in my grip as I approached. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture, all angles and perfect proportions. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch, amber-flecked brown, observing me with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Good evening, sir," I managed, voice steadier than I expected. "Welcome to Carluccio's. May I tell you about our wine selection tonight?" He didn't respond immediately, just studied me with those unsettling eyes. One of his guards shifted slightly, and I noticed the subtle bulge of a weapon beneath his jacket. "What would you recommend?" His voice was unexpectedly soft, tinged with the barest hint of an Italian accent. I blinked, caught off guard by the genuine question. Most patrons like him, the ones who arrived with security and made Marco nervous, typically ordered without consultation, flaunting knowledge of rare vintages and exclusive reserves. "The 2015 Brunello di Montalcino is exceptional," I offered, falling back on the wine that had become my standard recommendation after 3 years of serving. "But if you prefer something less conventional, we just received a small allocation of Barolo from a family producer in Piedmont. It's not on the list yet." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. He nodded once. "The Barolo. Bring 2 glasses. 2 glasses." I glanced around, noticing for the first time that the table was set for 2, though he was alone. "Right away, sir." As I turned to leave, A wave of dizziness washed over me. I gripped the edge of a nearby chair, waiting for it to pass. 3 days of double shifts on 4 hours of sleep per night was catching up with me. Just a few more hours, I told myself. Just get through tonight. I returned with the wine, focusing intently on not spilling as I poured a taste for him. His eyes never left my face, even as he swirled the ruby liquid and took a careful sip. "You have good taste," he said, nodding for me to fill both glasses. "Sit." The command, delivered so casually, made me freeze mid-pour. "Excuse me?" "Sit," he repeated, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Please." I glanced over at Marco, who was watching the interaction with undisguised horror. When our eyes met, he gave a small, frantic nod. "I'm afraid I'm still on shift, sir," I said carefully. The corner of his mouth twitched. "I wasn't asking your manager, I was asking you." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't truly a request. With awkward movements, I lowered myself into the chair opposite him, hyper-aware of how out of place I looked. A waitress in a wrinkled uniform sitting at the table of the most powerful-looking man in the restaurant. He pushed the second glass of wine toward me. "I don't drink while working," I said automatically. "1 sip," he countered, "to tell me if you truly believe in your recommendation." Against my better judgment, I took the smallest possible taste. The wine was everything I'd promised. Rich, complex, with notes of tar and roses that lingered on the palate. "It's as good as I remembered," I admitted, setting the glass down firmly and making to stand. "Now, if you'll excuse me, what's your name?" he interrupted. "Emma," I answered reflexively. "Emma," he repeated, as if testing how the syllables felt in his mouth. "How long have you been working here, Emma?" The question felt invasive, but I couldn't see a way to avoid answering. 3 years. 3 years, he echoed, seeming genuinely surprised. "And how many shifts this week?" I hesitated, wondering why he cared. "This is my 8th consecutive shift." His expression darkened. 8 shifts in 7 days? The room suddenly seemed too warm. Black spots danced at the corners of my vision again, and I gripped the edge of the table. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on your food order." I stood too quickly. The restaurant tilted sideways, the floor seeming to rush up toward me. I was vaguely aware of the wine glass tipping, of reaching desperately for something to steady myself. The last thing I registered was a strong arm catching me before I hit the ground, and a voice that seemed to come from very far away. "I've got you." Then, darkness. I woke to the sound of quiet beeping and the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, eyes closed, trying to piece together what had happened. Fragments came back slowly. The weight of the tray, the corner table, amber eyes watching me intently, the floor rushing up to meet me. "She's awake," came a low voice. Unfamiliar, male. I forced my eyes open. The hospital room was private and unexpectedly luxurious, with a window overlooking city lights. An IV ran into my arm, and a monitor displayed my heart rate and blood pressure. And there he was, Alessio Russo, sitting in a chair beside my bed, jacket removed, shirt sleeves rolled up to expose muscular forearms. His guards stood by the door, faces impassive. Fear and confusion collided in my chest. Why are you—" "Severe dehydration, exhaustion, and hypoglycemia," he said, answering the question I hadn't asked. "You collapsed in my restaurant." "Your restaurant?" My voice came out raspy. "Carluccio's isn't—" "It is," he interrupted smoothly. "Along with 12 others across the city. I acquired the chain last month." I struggled to process this information. "But Marco never mentioned—" "Marco," Alessio said, his expression hardening, "has been relieved of his position." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "Because of me? Because I made a scene? Please, I need that job, I can't—" "Because he allowed a valuable employee to work herself to the point of collapse," he cut in, voice sharp. "Because he failed to ensure proper break schedules and created a hostile work environment. The owner before me may have tolerated such mismanagement, but I do not." My head was spinning. "And not just from dehydration. I don't understand why you're here. Why am I in this room? I don't have insurance that would cover—" "You don't need to concern yourself with a bill." He leaned forward, those intense eyes fixed on mine. What you need to concern yourself with is recovery. And then a new position. New position? I echoed weakly. You're being promoted, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Effective immediately, you're the new manager of Carluccio's. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. That's not possible. I'm just a server. I don't have management experience. You have 3 years of experience in my restaurant, working under incompetent leadership, and you still manage to develop an impressive knowledge of wine and maintain exemplary service standards. He stated this as if reciting facts from a file. More importantly, you have something Marco lacked: integrity and work ethic. The monitor beside me registered my accelerating heart rate. This doesn't make any sense. You don't know anything about me. For the first time, a genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his face into something almost boyish. I know more than you think, Emma Hayes. 26 years old, supporting a younger sister through college after your parents died 4 years ago in a car accident. Working 3 jobs until recently. Behind on rent for your apartment on Westlake Avenue. Ice flooded my veins. How do you... You collapsed in my arms, he said simply. Did you expect me not to find out who you are? The casual invasion of privacy rendered me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it shook with anger and fear. So what is this? Charity? Or do you expect something in return? His expression shuddered, became unreadable. This is business, Emma. I need competent people running my establishments. You've proven your capability through years of dedication despite poor management. And if I refuse? Why would you refuse a substantial salary increase, benefits, and regular hours? He tilted his head slightly. Unless you enjoy working yourself to the point of hospitalization? Put that way, it sounded ridiculous to object, yet something about this entire situation felt wrong, too convenient, too contrived. People like Alessio Russo didn't promote random waitresses who collapsed at their feet. Why me? I asked finally. Really? He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice had softened. Because when I asked about wine, you didn't recite the most expensive option to inflate the bill. Because you've worked for 3 years under a manager who took credit for your ideas. Because despite everything, you still care about doing things right. He paused. And perhaps because I recognize something in you that reminds me of myself, once. Before I could respond, the door opened, and a doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Alessio stood smoothly. Think about it, he said. I'll return tomorrow. As he moved toward the door, flanked by his silent guardians, he paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Oh, and Emma, when you return to Carluccio's, remember what I told you when you first opened your eyes. I frowned, trying to remember. You didn't say anything when I woke up. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Not here. In the restaurant, before the ambulance came. You regained consciousness briefly. His amber eyes held mine. You're the boss here now. That's what I said. I meant it. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with a bewildered doctor and the unsettling feeling that my life had just veered dramatically off course. All because I'd fainted at the feet of a man who was clearly much more dangerous than he appeared. Sleep evaded me that night, despite exhaustion saturating every cell in my body. The hospital room, though luxurious by medical standards, felt like a gilded cage. I stared at the ceiling, replaying my interaction with Alessio Russo, searching for hidden motives between his carefully chosen words. By morning, when the doctor arrived with discharge papers, I'd convinced myself the entire promotion offer was a fever dream, the delusion of an overworked mind. But then I saw the name on the insurance documents, Russo Holdings. You're good to go, Ms. Hayes, the doctor said, checking my vitals one last time, though I strongly recommend at least 3 days of rest before returning to work. Thank you, I murmured, accepting the papers with trembling hands. Did Mr. Russo leave any messages for me? The doctor's expression shifted subtly. He arranged for your transportation home. There's a car waiting outside. Sure enough, a sleek black Audi idled at the hospital entrance, a driver standing at attention beside the rear door. As I approached, clutching my bag of belongings, he nodded respectfully. "Ms. Hayes, Mr. Russo sends his regards and asks that you take the rest of the week to recover." He opened the door in a fluid motion. "He'll contact you on Monday regarding your return to Carluccio's." The leather seats enveloped me like butter as the car pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted windows, I watched the city slide by, first the medical district, then downtown, and finally my neighborhood with its mix of century-old buildings and neglected infrastructure. The contrast between this luxury vehicle and my surroundings couldn't have been starker. When we reached my apartment building, the driver insisted on escorting me to my door. I fumbled with my keys, acutely aware of the peeling paint and the flickering hallway light that maintenance had promised to fix months ago. "Ms. Hayes," the driver said before departing, extending a crisp envelope. "From Mr. Russo." Alone in my tiny apartment, I tore it open with unsteady fingers. Inside was a check with an amount that made me sink onto my worn sofa in disbelief, along with a handwritten note: "An advance on your new salary. Rest, recover. We'll speak Monday. A.R." I ran my fingers over the elegant script, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate prank. The amount would cover my rent, the overdue electricity bill, and my sister's textbooks with plenty to spare. It was exactly what I needed, suspiciously so. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "How's work?" "You never answered about the books." Guilt twisted in my stomach. I hadn't told her about my collapse or hospital stay. She had enough to worry about with midterms approaching. I texted back, "Sorry, crazy shifts. Don't worry about the books. Money coming your way tomorrow. Love you." Her response was immediate. "OMG, what? Did you rob a bank? Details." I smiled despite myself. "Got a promotion. Tell you everything this weekend." Setting my phone aside, I wandered to the window, gazing out at the sliver of city skyline visible between adjacent buildings. Somewhere out there, Alessio Russo was going about his day, making decisions that affected countless lives, including mine now. The thought sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. What did he really want from me? Monday arrived with dreary Seattle rain and a text message from an unknown number. Car, arriving at 9:30. AR. I'd spent the weekend oscillating between gratitude and suspicion, researching everything I could find about Alessio Russo. The results were frustratingly vague. Legitimate businessman, restaurateur, real estate investor. There were whispers of family connections to old-world crime syndicates, but nothing concrete. Just the sort of rumors that followed any successful Italian-American with security personnel and a commanding presence. At precisely 9:30, a different black car pulled up outside my building. The same driver held an umbrella for me as I slid into the back seat, heart hammering against my ribs. Instead of Carluccio's, we drove to a towering glass building downtown. The driver led me through a private entrance to an express elevator that required a key card. "Mr. Russo is expecting you," he said, as the doors opened directly into a stunning office suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Alessio stood by the windows, his back to me, hands clasped behind him. The morning light silhouetted his tall frame, casting him in dramatic contrast. Without turning, he spoke. "What did you think of the check, Emma?" His use of my first name sent an unexpected jolt through me. "It was generous. It was fair," he countered, finally turning to face me. Today he wore a charcoal suit that fit him as if it had been poured onto his frame. Perhaps even inadequate compensation for years of underpayment. I squared my shoulders, determined not to be intimidated in this tower of wealth and power. "Why am I here instead of at the restaurant?" He gestured to a seating area where a coffee service waited. "Because managing Carluccio's is only the beginning. Please sit." I perched on the edge of a leather armchair, declining the coffee he offered. "The beginning of what, exactly?" "Your new career." He sat across from me, completely at ease. "I'm restructuring the management of my restaurant group. I need people I can trust." "You don't know me," I pointed out, echoing my words from the hospital. "I know enough." His amber eyes studied me with that same unsettling intensity. "You have integrity, resilience, and exceptional observational skills. You recognize the quality of that Barolo without formal training. You've survived difficult circumstances without compromising your principles. You had me investigated, I said flatly. A slight smile touched his lips. Of course I did. I investigate everyone who works for me. I don't work for you yet. I haven't accepted anything, haven't you? He nodded toward my purse where the deposited check receipt lay. You cashed the advance. Heat rushed to my face. I have bills. That doesn't mean I've agreed to, Emma. The way he said my name, soft but commanding, halted my protest. I'm offering you opportunity, not obligation. If you wish to walk away, the door is there. Keep the money. Consider it compensation for your mistreatment under previous management. For a moment, I considered it, standing, walking out, returning to the life I knew. Difficult but predictable, safe in its own way. But then what? More double shifts? More choosing between electricity and proper meals? More watching my sister struggle while I worked myself into collapse? What exactly would this job entail? I asked finally. Something flickered in his eyes, satisfaction perhaps. Initially, managing Carluccio's, restructuring staff, improving service protocols, revitalizing the menu with the executive chef. Once that's running smoothly, overseeing the implementation of those changes across other locations. It sounded reasonable, challenging, but within the realm of possibility. And my qualifications? I pressed. I've never managed anything. You've been unofficially managing for years, picking up slack for incompetent supervisors. He leaned forward slightly. You know the business from the ground up. That's more valuable than an MBA with no practical experience. A thought occurred to me. Is this how you started, working your way up through restaurants? Something darkened in his expression, a shadow passing over those amber depths. My path was different. Family business. He didn't elaborate. The silence stretched between us, weighted with unspoken histories. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me since the hospital. Why me? Really? Out of all the people who work in your restaurants, why single out a waitress who happened to faint at your table? He considered me for a long moment, because in that moment before you collapsed, when you recommended the Barolo despite it offering you no advantage, I saw something rare, authenticity. In my world, Emma, genuine people are more precious than gold. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that perhaps his interest wasn't sinister, that maybe, just maybe, this was the lucky break I'd stopped believing in years ago. When would I start? The words left my mouth before I'd fully committed to them. His smile transformed his face again, creating a startling contrast to his usual intensity. Today. Right now. He pressed an intercom button. Send in Anthony. Moments later, a door opened, and a man entered, early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing of someone comfortable in corporate settings. Emma, this is Anthony Vega, my hospitality director. He'll walk you through everything you need to know about your new position. Alessio stood, buttoning his jacket in one smooth motion. I have another meeting, but I'll check in later today at Carluccio's. As he moved toward the door where his security detail waited, he paused beside my chair, his hand lightly touching my shoulder. The contact, though brief, sent warmth cascading through me. Remember, Emma, he said, voice pitched for my ears alone. You earned this. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Then he was gone, leaving me with Anthony and the lingering sensation of his touch on my shoulder. The next 6 hours passed in a whirlwind of information, employee files, vendor contracts, profit and loss statements, scheduling protocols. Anthony was thorough and surprisingly patient with my questions. Mr. Russo has a good eye for talent, he remarked as we reviewed the restaurant's finances over lunch, but this is unusual, even for him. Unusual how? I asked, trying to sound casual. Anthony gave me a measured look. He doesn't typically take such personal interest in staffing decisions below executive level. Before I could press for more details, his phone buzzed. Mr. Russo wants us at Carluccio's now. The staff has been informed of the management change. My stomach clenched. I'd been so consumed with paperwork and procedures that I hadn't considered facing my former coworkers as their new boss. The restaurant was quiet when we arrived, the afternoon lull between lunch and dinner service. The staff had been assembled in the dining area, servers, bartenders, line cooks, dishwashers, all watching with varying degrees of curiosity and resentment as Anthony introduced me as the new manager. "Some of you already know Emma," he concluded. "She's been promoted based on her years of dedicated service and her intimate knowledge of Carluccio's operations. Mr. Russo has complete confidence in her ability to lead this team." The silence that followed was deafening. I recognized the expressions on their faces, the same mixture of confusion and suspicion I'd felt in the hospital room. "Thank you, Anthony," I said, finding my voice. "I know this is unexpected. I was as surprised as you are." I scanned the familiar faces. "I've worked alongside most of you for years. I know your strengths because I've witnessed them firsthand. I also know the challenges we've faced under previous management." A few nodded cautiously. Encouraged, I continued. "My door will always be open. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I promise to listen to your concerns and ideas. This is still our restaurant. We just have better support now." As I spoke, I noticed movement near the entrance. Alessio had arrived with 2 of his guards, standing silently at the back of the room, watching the proceedings with those penetrating eyes. After the meeting dispersed, with Anthony taking kitchen staff for separate briefings, Alessio approached me. "You handled that well," he said, genuine approval in his voice. "They think I slept with you to get this job," I replied bluntly, keeping my voice low. He didn't flinch at my candor. "And does that bother you?" "Of course it does. Why? You and I know the truth." I stared at him, incredulous. "Because respect has to be earned, and rumors like that undermine my authority before I've even started." A slow smile spread across his face. "Exactly right. So what will you do about it?" I realized he was testing me. "Prove them wrong through actions, not words. Show them I'm qualified through results." He nodded once, satisfied. "Your office is this way." He led me to what had been Marco's domain, a small room adjacent to the wine cellar. But where Marco's office had been cluttered and disorganized, this space had been completely transformed. New furniture, state-of-the-art computer equipment, even the lighting had been upgraded. "When did you do all this?" I asked, running my fingers over the smooth surface of the desk. "Yesterday." He shrugged, as if completely renovating an office overnight was trivial. The old setup wasn't suitable. As I took in the space, my space now, the reality of everything began to sink in. 24 hours ago, I'd been a waitress living paycheck to paycheck. Now I was managing a high-end restaurant, reporting directly to a man whose very presence made rooms fall silent. "This is really happening," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "It is." He moved closer, his proximity sending that same inexplicable warmth through my body. "Are you ready?" Looking into those amber eyes, I realized the question carried weight beyond the immediate context of the restaurant. Whatever game Alessio Russo was playing, I was now a piece on his board. "Yes," I answered, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'm ready." Something flashed in his eyes, approval, satisfaction, perhaps something deeper. He reached out, adjusting a pen on my desk that was slightly askew. "I'll check in tomorrow," he said, voice dropping to that intimate tone that seemed reserved for me alone. "Call if you need anything, any time." As he turned to leave, one of his guards leaned in, whispering something urgent. Alessio's expression hardened instantly, the warmth vanishing like fog in sunlight. "Secure the perimeter," he ordered, his voice now cold steel, "and get her a protection detail, now." Fear sliced through me. What's happening? He turned back to me, conflict evident in his expression. "A complication. Nothing for you to worry about." But the sudden appearance of another security guard at my office door told a different story. Whatever was happening, it had something to do with me, and it was dangerous enough to put Alessio Russo on high alert. Night fell over Carluccio's, bringing with it the dinner rush and the surreal experience of overseeing service rather than participating in it. I moved between tables with a new perspective, observing patterns I'd never noticed as a server. Which staff members anticipated guest needs, which ones needed guidance, how the rhythm of the kitchen affected timing in the dining room. All the while, I remained acutely aware of the security guard positioned near the entrance. His presence was subtle enough not to alarm customers, but obvious enough to remind me of Alessio's cryptic warning, "Emma." The hostess approached, her expression tense. "There's someone asking for you, says he's an old friend, but I don't recognize him." My pulse quickened. "Name?" "Michael Donovan. Said you'd know him." The name meant nothing to me. "What does he look like?" "Mid-30s, expensive suit. Very insistent." She hesitated, kind of intense. I glanced toward the security guard, who had already straightened, his hand moving subtly toward his jacket. "Tell him I'm in a meeting. Get his contact information." She nodded and hurried back to the front. Minutes later she returned, looking relieved. "He left when I asked for his number. Said he'd come back another time." The security guard was already on his phone, speaking in hushed tones. I caught fragments. Unknown male, claiming acquaintance, left premises. By closing time, my nerves were frayed from the combination of first-day stresses and the mysterious visitor. As the last customers departed and staff began cleanup, the guard approached. "Ms. Hayes, I've been instructed to escort you home tonight." "That's not necessary," I began, but his expression made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "Mr. Russo was explicit about your safety." He handed me a small card with a number. "This connects directly to security. Mr. Russo asks that you use it if anything seems unusual." The drive to my apartment was tense, the guard constantly checking mirrors and scanning intersections. At my building, he insisted on escorting me to my door and checking my apartment before leaving. "Lock everything," he instructed. "Don't open for anyone you don't recognize." Alone in my apartment, I sank onto the sofa, the day's events crashing over me like a wave. My phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number I now recognized as Alessio's. "All quiet?" I typed back, "Yes." "Who is Michael Donovan?" The response came quickly. "No one you should concern yourself with. How was your first day?" The deflection was obvious, but I played along. Overwhelming. But good. "Thank you for the opportunity." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "You're welcome. Get some rest. Car will arrive at 8:30 tomorrow." I stared at the message, trying to decipher the man behind these carefully measured words. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I drifted into uneasy sleep. Morning brought rain again, washing the city in shades of gray. The promised car arrived precisely on time, but instead of the driver from yesterday, Alessio himself waited inside. "Good morning," he said as I slid into the back seat, surprise evident on my face. "I thought we might discuss strategy on the way." He looked immaculate as always, his tailored suit a deep navy that made his amber eyes more pronounced. A faint scent surrounded him, something expensive and subtle, like cedar and spice. "Strategy for what, exactly?" I asked, trying to ignore how the enclosed space of the car amplified his presence. "Managing potential obstacles." His eyes met mine, serious and direct. "Your promotion has created ripples." "Because of Michael Donovan?" I pressed. Alessio's expression remained neutral, but I noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "Donovan is a business associate with whom I have differences of opinion. His appearance yesterday was a message to me, not you. A message saying what? That he's aware of my interest in Carluccio's, and in its new manager." His gaze was penetrating. "Some people don't appreciate change, Emma, especially when it threatens established arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" The question escaped before I could consider its wisdom. A shadow crossed his face. The previous management at Carluccio's had certain agreements with local entities. Favorable tables without reservations, special treatment for certain guests, cash transactions that didn't always reach the books. Understanding dawned. Money laundering? Among other things. He looked out the window, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass. "I've been cleaning up operations since acquiring the restaurants. Not everyone appreciates the new transparency." The implications sent a chill through me. "Am I in danger?" His eyes snapped back to mine. "No, not while you're under my protection." The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring, but instead raised new questions about exactly what kind of man held such confidence in his ability to ensure safety in apparently dangerous circumstances. "Is that what I am? Under your protection?" The words came out more challenging than I'd intended. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, at my directness. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You're under my employment, Emma." The protection is a courtesy I extend to all my key personnel, but the security detail, the personal texts, showing up this morning instead of sending a driver, that's standard for all your managers? The car slowed as we approached Carluccio's. Instead of answering immediately, Alessio studied me with those unsettling eyes. "No," he finally admitted. "That's not standard." Before I could pursue this revelation, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening instantly. "Change of plans," he told the driver. "Take us to the penthouse office." "What's wrong?" I asked as the car smoothly reversed direction. "A situation that requires attention." His voice had shifted to that steel-cold tone from yesterday. "Nothing for you to worry about. It clearly involves me if I'm being redirected." He glanced at me, something like approval flashing in his eyes. "Observant. Yes, it concerns you tangentially. We've received information that Donovan has been asking questions about you. Background, history, connections to me." My stomach tightened. Why would he care about a restaurant manager? "Because you're not just a restaurant manager to him." Alessio's jaw tightened. "Your leverage." The remainder of the drive passed in tense silence. At the downtown building, we bypassed the office suite I'd visited yesterday, instead taking the elevator to the top floor. A penthouse that combined luxurious living space with what appeared to be a private command center. Men in suits moved with military precision, speaking in hushed tones. Multiple screens displayed what looked like security footage from various locations, including, I realized with a jolt, the exterior of my apartment building. "You've been watching my home?" I demanded, anger overriding fear. Alessio guided me to a quiet corner, his hand at the small of my back. "Since yesterday, for your protection, that's necessary," he cut in, voice firm but not unkind. "Donovan is not someone who respects boundaries." "And you do?" I challenged. His eyes darkened. "I respect what's mine." The possessive statement hung between us, charged and ambiguous. Before I could respond, a man approached with a tablet. "Sir, we've got confirmation. Donovan's men have been surveilling both the restaurant and Ms. Hayes' residence since Tuesday." Tuesday, the day I'd fainted, the day Alessio had first spoken to me. "Increase security at all locations," Alessio ordered. "And prepare the Harbor Island property." The man nodded and retreated. Alessio turned back to me, his expression grave. "Emma, I need you to listen carefully. Michael Donovan is dangerous, not in the way people think I am, with rules and codes, but unpredictably, personally dangerous. He sees my interest in you as an opportunity. Your interest in me," I repeated slowly. "What exactly is the nature of that interest, Mr. Russo?" Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the edges that transformed his face. "Alessio," he corrected gently. "And that's a conversation for another time." "No," I insisted, finding courage from somewhere deep inside. "That's a conversation for now. I've been swept into something I don't understand, with security guards and surveillance and mysterious threats. I deserve to know why." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well." He gestured to a seating area overlooking the bay. "The truth, then." We sat across from each other, the panoramic view of Seattle's waterfront spread before us like a living painting. Alessio leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "My family has been in this city for 3 generations, he began, voice quiet but intense. "We built businesses, created opportunities, protected our interests, sometimes by methods outside conventional law." "You're saying you're in the Mafia," I stated bluntly. A shadow of a smile touched his lips. "The media loves that term. The reality is more complex. My grandfather came from Sicily with certain traditions. My father continued some of those traditions while establishing legitimate enterprises. When I took control 5 years ago after his death, I accelerated the transition to completely legitimate operations. But not everyone approved, I guessed. No. Men like Donovan preferred the old ways, more profitable, less scrutiny. When I began acquiring businesses like Carluccio's and cleaning up their operations, It threatened arrangements that had existed for decades. And where do I fit into this? His amber eyes held mine. You were unexpected, Emma. I went to Carluccio's that night for a routine inspection of a new acquisition. I wasn't looking for anything beyond business, but then there was you. His voice softened. Exhausted, clearly underappreciated, yet still maintaining standards and integrity. When you recommended that Barolo instead of pushing the most expensive wine, I was intrigued. When you collapsed and I caught you, I felt... He paused, seemingly searching for the right word. Responsible? I suggested. Protective, he corrected. Then I learned more about you. Your history, your struggles, your unwavering support of your sister despite your circumstances. I recognized something in you that I value above all else. Loyalty, I said quietly. His eyes widened slightly. Yes, exactly. And strength, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that endures. So you promoted me because you admired my character? Partially. He hesitated. But there's more. When I help someone, truly help them, not just with money but with opportunity, I expect loyalty in return. I wanted you in my circle, Emma. I wanted someone I could trust running Carluccio's. And now? His expression shifted again, becoming more intense. Now, I want to keep you safe from Donovan, who sees my interest in you, however professional, as a vulnerability he can exploit. The pieces began fitting together, the security, the texts, the personal attention. You think he'll try to use me to get to you? I know he will. Alessio's voice hardened, which is why I need you to temporarily relocate to a secure property. You want me to go into hiding? I stared at him in disbelief. I have a job, the job you gave me. I have responsibilities, my sister, all of which can be managed remotely for a short time. He reached across the space between us, his hand covering mine. The contact sent warmth spreading up my arm. Emma, I wouldn't ask if it weren't necessary. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. I looked down at his hand on mine, strong, with an unexpected gentleness in his touch. How long? A few days, a week at most. Just until we resolve the situation with Donovan. And how exactly do you plan to resolve it? I asked, suddenly afraid of the answer. He withdrew his hand slowly. Legally. Despite what you may think, I don't resort to violence unless absolutely necessary. Donovan and I will come to an understanding. Something in his tone, a cold certainty, made me shiver. This man, with his elegant suits and refined manners, possessed a dangerous edge I was only beginning to comprehend. I need time to think, I said finally. He nodded, respecting my hesitation. Of course, but not too much time. Every hour increases the risk. As if to emphasize his point, one of his men approached urgently. Sir, we have movement at the apartment building. Alessio was on his feet instantly, moving toward the monitors. I followed, heart racing. On the screen, 2 men in unmarked maintenance uniforms were entering my building. The timestamp showed this was happening now, in real time. They're not building staff, confirmed the security officer. We checked the schedule. Alessio's expression hardened into something terrifying. Intercept them. Now, he turned to me. All pretense of casual conversation gone. Pack a bag. You're leaving immediately. The cold command in his voice should have angered me. Instead, watching the strangers enter my building with unknown intentions sent fear coursing through my veins. What about my sister? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. His expression softened fractionally. Where is she? University of Washington. She lives in the dorms. He nodded to one of his men. Arrange protection for Ms. Hayes's sister. Discreet but thorough. Turning back to me, he added gently, She'll be safe. You have my word. It was strange how quickly I'd come to believe him when he spoke with that tone, as if his word was an unbreakable covenant. Okay, I said finally. I'll go to your safe house, but I want daily updates on my sister, on the restaurant, and on the situation with Donovan. A smile touched his lips, genuine, almost proud. Not many people make demands of me, Emma Hayes. I'm not asking for much. No, you're not. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that seemed reserved for me alone. Which is why you'll get exactly what you've asked for, and more. The promise lingered between us, laden with meanings I wasn't ready to explore. Beyond the windows, rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing away the ordinary world I'd inhabited just days ago, before I fainted into the arms of a man who was rapidly becoming both my protector and my greatest unknown. The safe house was nothing like I had imagined. I'd envisioned something Spartan and hidden, perhaps a nondescript apartment with security features. What I found instead was a stunning waterfront property on Harbor Island, with panoramic views of the Seattle skyline, the kind of place featured in architectural magazines. "This is your idea of lying low?" I asked, as Alessio's security chief, Vincent, led me through the glass and cedar structure. Vincent's stoic expression didn't change. "The property isn't registered under Mr. Russo's name. The security system is military grade. The windows are bulletproof." He gestured to a panel near the entryway. "This controls everything. Lights, temperature, security alerts. The house is fully stocked with food and necessities." I wandered toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching ferries cross Elliott Bay. The space felt simultaneously exposed and impenetrable. All that glass creating an illusion of vulnerability while offering a strategic view of any approach. "How long has Alessio owned this place?" I asked, running my fingers along the smooth quartz countertop in the kitchen. "Mr. Russo acquired it 3 years ago," Vincent replied. "He uses it occasionally for high-security meetings or when international associates visit, and now for hiding waitresses," I murmured. A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's usually impassive face. "Former waitresses, current restaurant managers." He completed the tour efficiently, showing me the security features, communication protocols, and the fully equipped home office where I could remotely manage Carluccio's operations. 2 female security personnel would remain on site at all times, with male counterparts patrolling the perimeter. "Mr. Russo will be here this evening," Vincent informed me as he prepared to leave. "He has some matters to attend to first." "Matters concerning Michael Donovan?" I asked. Vincent's expression revealed nothing. "I'm not at liberty to discuss Mr. Russo's schedule." After he departed, leaving me with the 2 female guards who maintained a respectful distance, I explored the house more thoroughly. The master suite was clearly Alessio's occasional domain, the closet containing several suits and shirts in his size, the bathroom stocked with his preferred toiletries. I'd been given the guest suite, which was luxurious in its own right but felt less personal. I found myself drawn to the bookshelves in the living area, scanning titles that ranged from Italian classics to modern business theory to, surprisingly, poetry. Running my fingers along the spines, I tried to construct a picture of Alessio from these fragments. The books he read, the art he chose for his walls, the space he created for himself away from the world. As sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, colors that reminded me of his eyes, I settled at the desk in the home office and logged into Carluccio's systems remotely. Work would keep my mind occupied, distracted from the surreal turn my life had taken. I was deep in inventory analysis when I heard the security system announce an arrival. Moments later, Alessio appeared in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. He'd loosened his tie and removed his jacket, giving him a slightly less formal appearance than usual. "You're working," he observed, a note of approval in his voice. I closed the laptop. "It helps me think. How's my sister?" "Safe. We've assigned plainclothes security to her dormitory area." He moved into the room, perching on the edge of the desk. "She hasn't noticed them, and won't, unless there's a threat." "And my apartment?" His expression darkened. "The men were Donovans. They placed surveillance devices in your home." A cold shudder ran through me at the thought of strangers violating my personal space. What were they looking for? Information. Leverage. Anything to understand my interest in you. His jaw tightened. "They've been removed. Your apartment has been secured and cleaned of all devices. And Donovan?" Alessio's eyes met mine, his gaze steady. "We're meeting tomorrow." "To discuss what, exactly? Terms?" The single word carried weight, like a stone dropped into still water. "He needs to understand certain boundaries." "Boundaries concerning me?" Alessio studied me for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Yes, among other business matters. I stood, suddenly unable to remain still. This is insane. A week ago I was a waitress with normal problems. Bills, exhaustion, a crappy boss. Now I'm in a safe house because a Mafia boss is meeting with his rival about… What? Ownership rights to me? You are not property, Emma, Alessio said sharply, standing as well. No one owns you. Then what am I? Why am I here? Why does Donovan care about me? Alessio stepped closer, his proximity sending that now familiar warmth through my body despite my agitation. You're here because I protect what matters to me. Donovan cares because he's observed my attention toward you, and in our world, personal connections can be weaponized. Is that what I am to you? A personal connection? The question emerged more vulnerable than I'd intended. His amber eyes darkened as they held mine. What do you think? I think you're not someone who acts without purpose, I said carefully. Every move is calculated. The question is, what's the calculation that brought me here? A hint of a smile touched his lips. Not everything I do is calculated, Emma. His voice dropped lower. Some things are instinctive. The word hung between us, charged with meaning. I became acutely aware of our proximity, of the subtle scent of his cologne, of how the fading daylight cast shadows across the planes of his face. Like catching me when I fell, I said softly. Like that, he agreed. And like this. His hand rose slowly, giving me ample time to step away if I wished. When I remained still, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. The touch was feather-light, but sent electricity coursing through me. I should check on dinner, he said suddenly, withdrawing his hand. You must be hungry. The abrupt shift left me momentarily disoriented. Yes, I could eat. In the kitchen, Alessio moved with unexpected confidence, retrieving ingredients from the refrigerator and pantries. I watched in surprise as he efficiently chopped vegetables and heated olive oil in a pan. You cook? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. He glanced up with a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. My mother insisted all her children learn. She said a man who can't feed himself is always at someone else's mercy. Your mother sounds wise. She was. A shadow crossed his expression. Cancer. 8 years ago. I'm sorry. The simple condolence felt inadequate, but his nod of acknowledgement suggested he understood the sentiment behind it. As he continued preparing what appeared to be a traditional Italian pasta dish, I gathered the courage to ask more personal questions. You said children. Do you have siblings? A brother and sister, both younger. He added garlic to the pan, the aromatic scent filling the kitchen. My brother runs our legitimate businesses on the East Coast. My sister is a doctor in Chicago. Far from the family business, I observed. By design. I wanted her completely separate from our world. He glanced at me. My father disagreed. It was our first major conflict when I took over. I leaned against the counter, watching his confident movements. You took over young, didn't you? 28? Too young, many thought. He worked as he spoke, his hands never idle. My father's death was unexpected. Heart attack during a business dinner. That must have been difficult. He was quiet for a moment, focused on the task before him. It was complicated. My father and I had different visions for the future of our enterprises. His death forced an acceleration of changes I had planned to implement gradually. Changes like legitimizing operations? His eyes met mine, sharp and assessing. Yes. My father believed in traditional methods. I saw a future where our strength came from legitimate power. Real estate, hospitality, shipping, and others, like Donovan, preferred your father's ways, precisely. He drained the pasta, combining it with the sauce in a practiced motion. Michael Donovan was my father's contemporary. He views my reforms as weakness, my legitimate businesses as distractions. And me? Alessio paused, wooden spoon in hand. You he views as evidence of a fatal flaw, sentiment. In his world, caring for someone is tantamount to creating a hostage. The blunt assessment sent a chill through me. Is he right? Alessio resumed his cooking, his movements more measured now. There was a time when I would have agreed with him. When I first took control, I kept everyone at a distance. No serious relationships, no close friendships outside the family, nothing that could be leveraged against me. And now? I pressed. He plated the pasta with the precision of a chef, garnishing it with fresh herbs. Now I'm beginning to think that approach has its own cost. Isolation may prevent certain vulnerabilities, but it creates others. We moved to the dining table, where he poured wine, a Barolo, I noted with a small smile, and we began to eat. The pasta was exceptional, rich with flavors that spoke of authentic Italian cooking. "This is amazing," I admitted after several bites. He looked pleased. "My mother's recipe. She was from a small village outside Naples." "Tell me about her," I requested, genuinely curious about the woman who had shaped this complex man. As we ate, Alessio spoke of his mother, her strength, her wisdom, how she had maintained a sense of normalcy for her children despite the family's unconventional business. He described Sunday dinners where business was forbidden as a topic, and how she had insisted he attend university, despite his father's belief that practical experience was more valuable. "She would have liked you," he said suddenly, catching me off guard. "Why do you say that?" "Your resilience. Your loyalty to your sister." His eyes held mine. "Your refusal to be intimidated by power." I laughed softly. "Is that what you think? That I'm not intimidated by you? Are you?" The question was genuine. His head tilted slightly as he studied me. I considered it honestly. "I'm cautious, aware of who you are, what you represent. But no, not intimidated in the way you mean. Explain." I traced the rim of my wine glass, gathering my thoughts. "You have power. Obvious power. Security details, properties like this, the ability to make people disappear from jobs overnight. But power itself doesn't frighten me. The abuse of power does, and you're waiting to see if I'll abuse mine." It wasn't a question. "I'm waiting to understand why you've directed it toward me," I clarified. "Why a man like you would take interest in a waitress who fainted at his table." Alessio set down his fork, his full attention now on me. "I told you before." "You gave me partial truths," I interrupted. "Business justifications. I want the real reason." For a moment, I thought I'd pushed too far. His expression became unreadable, his posture perfectly still in that way that suggested controlled power. Then, surprising me, he smiled. "You're remarkably direct for someone in your position." "My position being under my protection," he supplied. "Most people would be more deferential." "If you wanted deference, you chose the wrong waitress to catch." His laugh was unexpected and genuine, transforming his face completely. "Evidently." He refilled our glasses, his movements elegant and precise. "The real reason, then." He leaned back, amber eyes holding mine. "When you collapsed and I caught you, something shifted. You were vulnerable but not weak. There's a difference. I found myself concerned for you in a way that went beyond the professional. When I learned more about you, your circumstances, your character, that concern deepened." "Into what?" I asked softly. "Interest. Admiration." He paused, then added with careful precision, "Desire." The word hung between us, charged and dangerous. My heart accelerated, blood rushing to my face. "That's a complication neither of us needs," I managed finally. "I agree," he said, surprising me again, "which is why I created a professional framework for our association. The promotion was merited, your qualifications are genuine, but I won't pretend my personal interest didn't accelerate the process." His honesty was disarming. "And now? What do you want from me now, Alessio?" The use of his first name seemed to please him. "Right now? Your safety. Beyond that." He hesitated. "I want the chance to know you better, without pressure or expectation. At your pace, not mine." It was perhaps the most normal thing he'd said to me, a request that could have come from any man interested in any woman. Yet coming from him, with his power and position, it carried different weight. "And if I say no, then you remain Carluccio's manager, with all the benefits and security that entails, for as long as you wish. Your career path would be determined by your performance, not your personal choices." I studied him, searching for signs of deception or manipulation. You'd accept that? Just a professional relationship? I wouldn't like it, he admitted with unexpected candor. But yes, I would accept it. What I won't accept is putting you at risk because of my interest, which is why you're here until the situation with Donovan is resolved. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression immediately hardening. What's wrong? I asked, recognizing the shift. Donovan has moved up our meeting tonight. He stood, already messaging someone on his phone. I need to go. Anxiety twisted in my stomach. Is that safe? His expression softened momentarily. Your concern is noted. He hesitated, then added, Stay in the house. The security team has instructions. I'll return as soon as I can. As he moved toward the door, I followed. Alessio, I called, stopping him. Be careful. He turned, something intense flickering in his amber eyes. Always. Then, with a nod to the security team, left alone with the remains of our dinner and 2 silent guards maintaining a respectful distance, I moved to the windows, watching his car disappear into the night. The Seattle skyline glittered across the water, beautiful and distant, like the normal life I'd inhabited just days ago. Whatever happened at that meeting with Donovan would determine not just Alessio's fate, but mine as well. Our lives had become entangled in ways I couldn't have imagined when I'd first looked up to see those amber eyes watching me across Carluccio's dining room. I touched the window, cool glass beneath my fingertips, and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake in allowing myself to be drawn into Alessio Russo's dangerous, seductive world, or if, perhaps, it was the first right decision I'd made in years. Sleep eluded me as midnight came and went with no word from Alessio. I paced the living room, checking my phone obsessively, jumping at every distant sound that carried across the water. The female security guards maintained their vigilant positions, their calm professionalism offering little reassurance. Does he often do this? I finally asked one of them, Diane. She'd introduced herself earlier. Her expression remained neutral. Mr. Russo handles high-stakes negotiations personally. Sometimes they run long. But is he usually out of contact? A slight softening around her eyes betrayed a hint of sympathy. He'll be back, Ms. Hayes. He always is. The always struck me. How many nights had his security team spent waiting for his return from dangerous meetings? How many times had he walked into rooms with men like Donovan, where power and threat hung in the air like invisible smoke? Near 2 a.m, I'd worn myself out with worry and curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw I'd found in a cabinet. I must have dozed off, because I startled awake to the sound of the security system announcing an arrival. Footsteps approached, heavier than I remembered, lacking Alessio's usual graceful stride. I sat up, heart pounding, as a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Alessio, but not as I'd ever seen him. His usual immaculate appearance was disrupted. Tie missing, collar open, a darkening bruise on his jaw. Most alarming was the smear of what looked like blood on his white shirt cuff. You're hurt, I said, rising to my feet. His eyes found mine, the amber darkened to almost black. It's not my blood. The statement should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a surge of relief that he was standing before me, essentially whole. Donovan? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Will no longer be a concern. His voice was cold, detached in a way I hadn't heard before. Then, seeing something in my expression, he added more gently, He's alive, Emma. But he understands his position now. I approached cautiously, as one might a wounded predator. What happened? Alessio moved to the bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He downed it in one swift motion before answering. Negotiations became physical. It happens occasionally in my line of work. You fought him? A humorless smile touched his lips. Let's say we had a forceful exchange of perspectives, facilitated by our respective security teams. I reached out hesitantly, my fingertips lightly touching the bruise forming on his jaw. He went perfectly still at the contact, his eyes locked on mine. You should ice this, I said softly. Something in his expression shifted, the coldness receding like frost under morning sun. Without a word, he caught my hand as I withdrew it, holding it gently in his much larger one. You waited up, he observed. I was worried. I admitted. His thumb traced a small circle against my palm, sending shivers up my arm. You shouldn't worry about me, Emma. I've survived much worse than Michael Donovan. That doesn't mean I can't care what happens to you. The words hung between us, more revealing than I'd intended. Alessio's eyes darkened further, but this time not with coldness, with something warmer, more dangerous. Is that what you do? Care what happens to me? His voice had dropped to that intimate tone that seemed reserved for me alone. I should have pulled away then, maintained the professional boundary he'd promised to respect. Instead, I found myself stepping closer. Against my better judgment, I whispered. Yes. The confession seemed to break something inside him. With a swiftness that took my breath away, he pulled me against him. One hand cradling the back of my head as his lips found mine. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. And I had imagined it, I realized, more than I'd admitted to myself. It wasn't demanding or possessive, but questioning, almost reverent. His lips moved against mine with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the power I knew he possessed. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that since you recommended that Barolo, he murmured. A small laugh escaped me. That's oddly specific. It was the moment I realized you were different. His hand moved to cup my cheek. You weren't trying to impress me or gain advantage. You were simply being yourself. I didn't know who you were, I reminded him. Exactly. His thumb brushed my lower lip. No pretense. No fear. Just you. With your tired eyes and your perfect wine recommendation and your refusal to be anything but authentic. I placed my hand over his, my mind racing with the implications of what was happening between us. This complicates everything. Everything worth having is complicated, Emma. His eyes held mine, serious and intent. The question is whether you want to explore those complications with me. The sincerity in his voice gave me courage. What happens if I say yes? What does that look like, with someone like you? It looks like whatever we decide it should. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I'm not offering a contract with predetermined terms. I'm offering a beginning with a man who comes home with blood on his shirt and bruises on his face, I pointed out. His expression sobered. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. My world has edges most people never see, but I can promise you this, with you, I will always be honest. I will always protect you, and I will never ask you to compromise who you are. His words resonated deep within me. After years of struggling alone, of putting everyone else's needs before my own, the promise of protection, of being valued for exactly who I was, held a seductive appeal I couldn't deny. When can I go back to my apartment? I asked, changing the subject slightly. If he was disappointed by my deflection, he didn't show it. Tomorrow, if you wish. Donovan has agreed to certain terms that ensure your safety. And my sister? Protected, as promised. Though she can be told it's a university security initiative if you prefer, she doesn't know the truth. I nodded, grateful for his understanding. And Carluccio's? Awaits its manager's return. A slight smile touched his lips. Though Anthony reports you've been remarkably effective even from here. I stepped back slightly, needing space to think clearly. I need time, Alessio. This has all happened so fast. The promotion, Donovan, this place, us. I need to find my footing. He nodded, respecting my boundaries without hesitation. Of course. Take whatever time you need. The only thing that changes is you're free to return to your normal life without looking over your shoulder. And us? I asked quietly. That's entirely your decision. His eyes held mine, sincere and unwavering. My interest hasn't changed. My patience hasn't wavered. If you're ready to explore what's between us, I'll be here. The promise in his voice sent warmth spreading through me. I reached up, gently touching the bruise on his jaw once more. You should really ice this. He caught my hand again, pressing a kiss to my palm, if you insist. 3 weeks later, Carluccio's was transformed. Under my management, with Alessio's backing, we'd implemented changes that had dramatically improved both service and profitability. Staff who'd initially resented my promotion had become allies as they witnessed my commitment to fairness and excellence. I'd moved to a new apartment, more secure, closer to the restaurant, with a spare room for when my sister visited. Alessio had offered to help with the expense, but I'd insisted on paying my own way, accepting only the salary that came with my legitimate position. We'd settled into an unexpected rhythm, professional during the day when he occasionally visited the restaurant, personal in the evenings when we would sometimes share dinner, talking for hours about everything and nothing. True to his word, he never pushed, never demanded, simply offering his company and his undivided attention when our schedules aligned. I learned more about him with each encounter. His passion for restoring vintage Italian motorcycles, his unexpected knowledge of Renaissance art, his habit of reading poetry late at night when sleep evaded him. He learned about me, too, my dreams of someday opening my own small cafe, my collection of vintage cookbooks, my weakness for 1940s film noir. The night everything changed was ordinary at first. Carluccio's had just closed after a busy Friday service. I was in my office reviewing the night's receipts when a knock came at my door. Alessio stood there, elegant as always in one of his impeccable suits, a small wrapped package in his hand. "I thought you were in New York until Sunday," I said, unable to hide my pleased surprise. "I concluded business early," he entered, closing the door behind him. "I wanted to give you this in person." The package was small, wrapped in cream-colored paper. I opened it carefully to find a vintage first edition of my favorite cookbook, one I'd mentioned in passing weeks earlier. "How did you remember this?" I asked, running my fingers over the embossed cover. "I remember everything you tell me, Emma." The simple statement carried weight beyond the words themselves. I set the book down carefully, emotion tightening my throat. Over these weeks, he'd shown me who he was beyond the power and danger. Thoughtful, intelligent, unexpectedly gentle in private moments. "I think I'm ready," I said quietly. He went perfectly still, as he often did in moments of significance. "Ready for?" "Us." I stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance we'd maintained. "Whatever complications that brings." Something flared in his amber eyes. Hope, desire, relief. "You're certain?" In answer, I rose on tiptoes and pressed my lips to his. Unlike our first kiss, this one held no hesitation, no question, only certainty and promise. When we finally broke apart, he cradled my face in his hands, his gaze intense. "I won't waste this chance, Emma. What's between us? It's rare. Precious." "I know," I whispered, understanding now what had been building since that first night when I'd fainted into his arms. Not just attraction or gratitude or fascination, but something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits beneath our vastly different circumstances. Later that night, as Seattle's lights glittered beyond the windows of his Harbor Island home, I lay beside Alessio, his arm draped protectively across my waist. The journey from exhausted waitress to restaurant manager to this moment had been unpredictable and swift, yet somehow felt inevitable, as if all paths would have eventually led here, to this man whose strength and vulnerability mirrored my own. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. I turned to face him, tracing the now-healed mark on his jaw where Donovan's violence had left its temporary imprint. "That sometimes falling is the beginning, not the end." His eyes softened with understanding. "And sometimes the person who catches you is the one you've been waiting for all along." As his lips found mine once more, I surrendered to the truth of what we'd become. Two souls who had recognized in each other not just desire or advantage, but possibility. The world outside, with all its dangers and complications, would still be there tomorrow. But tonight, in the arms of the man who had seen my value when I was invisible to everyone else, I had found something I never expected when I fainted from exhaustion that fateful night. Not just a new beginning, but a home. The whispers came first. Then clarity washed over Betty's 8-year-old mind like a tidal wave, as foreign syllables transformed into perfect meaning. She turned to her mother with wide eyes, tugging at the black uniform sleeve while the two Chinese businessmen continued their conversation, unaware the child had deciphered every word. Heather Wilson checked her reflection in the staff bathroom mirror, straightening her bow tie while her daughter watched with curious eyes. 27 years old with only $26 in her account, until next week's paycheck, she had no choice but to bring Betty to tonight's elite Philadelphia gala. Remember, Stay in the kitchen corner, color quietly, and don't talk to the guests, Heather instructed, kneeling to smooth her daughter's simple blue dress. This job pays triple my normal rate. Enough for next month's rent, and maybe even that science kit you wanted. Betty nodded solemnly, clutching her small backpack of activities while thinking about the strange thing that happened yesterday at the grocery store. The Polish grandmother had been muttering to herself in her native language, and suddenly Betty understood every complaint about American bread prices. Head chef Boris raised an eyebrow at the child hiding behind Heather's legs, but quickly softened when she explained her babysitter had canceled last minute. Fine, but keep her out of sight. These high society types don't want to see staff children at their fancy charity events. Heather rushed between tables with practiced grace, balancing champagne flutes while memorizing faces of Philadelphia's elite attending the Children's Hospital fundraiser. Her eyes lingered momentarily on the striking man at table 12, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing attention from everyone in the ballroom. Betty sat quietly in her designated corner, drawing pictures while occasionally glancing at the bustling kitchen staff preparing elegant dishes. She noticed how everyone seemed nervous when serving the handsome man at table 12, their hands slightly trembling as they approached him. The night progressed smoothly until Betty grew restless and wandered from her hiding spot, trailing silently behind the dessert cart as it rolled toward the main ballroom. The glittering chandeliers and swirling gowns captivated her attention as she ducked beneath a tablecloth to watch the spectacle unnoticed. Through the forest of expensive shoes and trailing gowns, Betty spotted her mother delivering drinks to table 12, where the important man sat surrounded by serious-faced associates. Something about their rigid posture made Betty's skin prickle with unease despite their polite smiles. From her hidden vantage point, Betty observed two waiters she hadn't seen before enter from a side door, their movements stiff and purposeful, unlike the fluid grace of the regular staff. They exchanged quick glances before approaching table 12 with a special bottle wrapped in an expensive-looking cloth. When they began speaking in rapid Sicilian while pouring a special glass for the important man, Betty froze as their foreign words suddenly became crystal clear in her mind. Once he drinks this, the boss is dead, and the Russians take control of Philadelphia by morning, the taller waiter whispered with chilling certainty. Betty's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched in horror, the assassin's plan unfolding in slow motion before her eyes. Without thinking, she scrambled from beneath the table and darted across the polished floor, ignoring shocked gasps from the elegant guests. "Don't drink it!" she screamed, lunging toward table 12 where the powerful man was raising the champagne flute to his lips. "They put something in it. They said you'd die if you drink it." The room fell into stunned silence as all eyes turned toward the small girl in the blue dress, her cheeks flushed with exertion and fear. Betty pointed frantically at the two waiters who were already backing toward the exit, their faces twisted with rage at the unexpected interruption. The man at table 12 slowly lowered his glass, dark eyes shifting from the trembling child to the retreating waiters with calculated precision. In one fluid motion, he stood and signaled to two suits by the door, who immediately blocked the exits, his expression never changing despite the chaos erupting around him. Security descended swiftly, surrounding the table as the important man, whom Betty heard someone address as Mr. Corvino, calmly instructed a guard to test the drink. The chemical detection strip turned an alarming shade of purple within seconds, confirming the deadly poison that would have stopped his heart instantly. Heather pushed through the crowd with wild panic in her eyes, dropping to her knees beside Betty and clutching her close. "I'm so sorry about my daughter, sir," she stammered, avoiding direct eye contact with the intimidating figure whose life her child had just saved. "Mr." Corvino studied them both with piercing intensity, his angular face betraying no emotion as security dragged the struggling assassins away. "How did your daughter know what was being said?" he asked in a surprisingly gentle voice, crouching down to Betty's eye level. Betty shrank against her mother's side, suddenly shy under the scrutiny of so many stares. "I heard them talking in a different language, but I understood the words somehow," she whispered, her small voice barely audible above the murmuring crowd. Heather stroked her daughter's hair protectively, trying to mask her own confusion and fear. "She's always been special with languages, picks them up instantly, but this is different," she explained hesitantly, sensing that providing honest answers was critical to their safety. "A remarkable gift," Mr. Corvino commented, a hint of genuine warmth breaking through his stoic exterior. He turned to address his associates with quiet authority, ordering the ballroom cleared of guests, while maintaining a reassuring smile for Betty's benefit. Within minutes, The grand space had emptied, except for Mr. Corvino's security team, the catering staff, and several serious men in expensive suits discussing the situation in hushed tones. Heather held Betty's hand tightly, unsure whether they were being protected or detained. "Please join me, Mr. Corvino gestured toward a private alcove away from prying ears, his invitation clearly not optional despite its polite delivery. "I believe I owe this brave young lady my life, and I never leave debts unpaid." The private alcove featured plush seating and soft lighting, creating an intimate space that contrasted sharply with the tension filling the air. Mr. Corvino's security chief whispered something urgent in his ear before departing, leaving them in an uncomfortable silence broken only by distant police sirens. Heather shifted nervously, acutely aware of her waitress uniform and the vast social chasm between them as Mr. Corvino, whom she now recognized as Auguste Corvino, the reclusive real estate magnate with rumored connections to organized crime, studied them intently. "We should go," she murmured, rising halfway from her seat, only to be halted by his raised hand. "The men who tried to kill me tonight work for the Bratva, Russian Mafia," August explained with surprising candor, his dark eyes fixed on Betty with undisguised curiosity. "Their boss has been trying to take my territory for months, and tonight they nearly succeeded because I wasn't careful enough." For several heartbeats, the only sound was the gentle hum of the air conditioning and Betty's soft breathing as August seemed to contemplate a significant decision. "Your extraordinary daughter just changed the course of a war, Ms." He paused, waiting for Heather to fill the silence with her name. "Wilson," she supplied hesitantly, instinctively pulling Betty closer as understanding dawned that they had unwittingly stumbled into something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. "Heather Wilson, and this is my daughter Betty. The Russians now know your faces," August stated matter-of-factly, his tone grave as he leaned forward with clasped hands. "Which means you're both in considerable danger until this situation is resolved permanently." Heather's face paled as the implications of August's words sank in, her grip on Betty's shoulder tightening protectively. "We're just ordinary people. Surely they wouldn't bother with us," she protested, though the certainty in his expression extinguished her hope before it could fully form. "These men don't leave witnesses, especially child witnesses who can understand their plans regardless of what language they speak," August explained gently, his attention shifting to Betty with undisguised fascination. "How long have you been able to understand languages you've never learned?" Betty fidgeted with the hem of her dress, suddenly self-conscious under his intense gaze. "It started about 6 months ago with our neighbor who speaks German. I heard her talking to her sister on the phone, and suddenly I could understand everything they said." August nodded thoughtfully, processing this information while his phone buzzed with incoming messages that he ignored completely. "My security team has already detained 3 Russian associates in the parking garage. They were waiting for confirmation of my death," he revealed with chilling casualness. Heather felt the room tilt slightly as the gravity of their situation became clearer with each passing minute. "What happens to us now?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady for Betty's sake, while her mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. "First, we relocate you somewhere safe. My penthouse has excellent security and is unknown to my enemies," August decided, already typing instructions to his team. "By morning, I'll have a more permanent solution arranged for your protection." Betty watched him curiously, her young mind somehow sensing the complex calculations happening behind his composed exterior. "You're not really just a businessman, are you?" she asked innocently, causing a rare smile to flicker across August's stern features. "Perceptive child," he remarked approvingly, meeting Betty's gaze with newfound respect. "Let's just say I have varied interests across Philadelphia that require particular management skills." The relative calm was shattered when August's security chief burst into the alcove, his usually impassive face tight with urgency. "Sir, we've intercepted communications. They've deployed a second team to ensure the job is completed," he reported tersely, pointedly glancing at Heather and Betty. August was on his feet instantly, all pretense of casual conversation abandoned as he issued rapid commands to his security team through a discreet earpiece. "Change of plans. We move now. Full protective detail," he ordered, gesturing for Heather and Betty to follow him immediately. As they hurried through a hidden service corridor, Betty suddenly clutched her mother's hand, whispering urgently, "Someone's speaking Sicilian again. 2 people behind the kitchen door." August stopped immediately at her words, signaling his guards to investigate with silent hand gestures. Within seconds, gunshots echoed through the corridor as August's men neutralized the threat, confirming Betty's warning with grim efficiency. Heather stifled a scream, covering Betty's ears while August regarded the child with newfound appreciation for her extraordinary ability. "Your daughter's gift may have saved us twice tonight," August murmured to Heather, as they were quickly escorted to an armored SUV waiting at the service entrance. "She might be the most valuable asset in this city right now." Through the tinted windows, Betty watched Philadelphia's glittering skyline blur past, her small hand still clutching her mother's, as she processed the terrifying, yet exhilarating events of the evening. Something fundamental had shifted in their lives, and despite her youth, she understood they could never return to the way things were before. August Corvino's penthouse sprawled across the top floor of the most exclusive building in Philadelphia, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city he effectively controlled. Betty pressed her small palm against the cool glass, marveling at the twinkling lights below while her mother paced nervously behind her. "Your daughter's ability isn't just unusual, it's unprecedented," Dr. Preston remarked, closing his medical bag after examining Betty. "I've worked with linguistic prodigies before, but instantaneous comprehension of unlearned languages defies current scientific understanding." Heather sank onto the luxurious sofa, exhaustion finally catching up as the adrenaline ebbed from her system. "She's always been bright, but this started 6 months ago after a high fever. I thought she was just good with languages," she explained, watching Betty explore the lavish apartment with childlike curiosity. August's phone buzzed continuously as reports flowed in from his network across the city. 3 more Russian operatives captured, surveillance established around Heather's modest apartment building, and intelligence suggesting the Bratva leadership remained unaware their assassination plot had failed. The power balance hung precariously in limbo, dependent on maintaining the illusion of normalcy. "My men intercepted this at your apartment," August said, handing Heather a crudely written note in Russian. "They were already looking for you. This confirms they know about Betty's ability and consider her a significant threat to their operations." Betty wandered back from the window, drawn by the tension in adult voices. "I could help you understand what they're saying if you need me to," she offered innocently, unaware of the strategic value her extraordinary gift represented in the ongoing power struggle between criminal organizations. Heather shook her head firmly, maternal protectiveness overriding everything else. "Absolutely not. She's a child, not a weapon in your war," she snapped at August, momentarily forgetting who she was addressing until his intense gaze locked with hers. Instead of the anger she expected, something softer flickered across August's face. Respect, perhaps even admiration. "You're right," he conceded with surprising humility, crouching to Betty's level. "You've been very brave, but your only job now is to stay safe while the adults handle this situation." The temporary peace shattered when August's security chief burst through the door, his normally composed demeanor fractured by urgency. "They've compromised Officer Simmons. We have a leak in the police department," he reported tensely, eyeing the civilians with obvious concern about speaking freely. "Tell me," August commanded, his posture shifting subtly into something more dangerous as he moved protectively closer to Heather and Betty. "Whatever it is, they need to know the reality of what we're facing." The security chief nodded grimly, lowering his voice despite the soundproofed walls. "The Russians believe you survived their attempt, but are weakened. They're planning to strike all your businesses simultaneously tomorrow to force you into the open, using civilian casualties as leverage." Heather gasped, her hand finding Betty's shoulder instinctively as the implications became clear. Dozens, possibly hundreds of innocent people would die in this power play. "You have to warn them. Evacuate the buildings," she urged, her previous distrust temporarily forgotten in the face of impending tragedy. August's expression hardened into something terrifying, yet oddly reassuring, the face of a man accustomed to impossible decisions with lives hanging in the balance. "I'll do better than warn them," he stated with quiet intensity. "I'll end this tonight." Betty tugged suddenly at August's sleeve, her small face serious beyond her years. "The man who was watching us from the building across the street. He was talking to someone on the phone in Sicilian about a tracker," she revealed, pointing toward the window where she'd been standing earlier. In a blur of controlled violence, August's security team sprang into action, sweeping the room with electronic detection equipment until they discovered the miniature tracking device hidden in the lining of Betty's backpack. The sophisticated Russian technology confirmed their worst fears. The enemy was closer than they'd realized. The helicopter landed on August's secondary property, a sprawling estate outside city limits, surrounded by dense forest and state-of-the-art security systems. Betty watched with wide eyes as armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their silhouettes barely visible in the pre-dawn light filtering through bulletproof windows. "You'll be safe here," August assured them, leading Heather and Betty through the elegant great room toward a wing specially prepared for their arrival. "My most trusted people are handling the situation in Philadelphia while we remain off-grid until the immediate threat is neutralized." Heather noted how different August appeared in this environment, less the polished businessman, and more the strategic commander, issuing orders with quiet authority, while maintaining constant awareness of their surroundings. She found herself oddly comforted by his competence despite the circumstances that had brought them together. Over breakfast prepared by August's private chef, Betty surprised everyone by addressing August in flawless Sicilian, perfectly mimicking his native dialect after hearing only fragments of phone conversations. "You speak like your grandfather did," she commented innocently, unaware of the profound effect her words had on the typically stoic man. August froze momentarily. Memories of his Sicilian grandfather, the family patriarch who had established their American foothold decades ago, washing over him unexpectedly. "How could you possibly know that?" he asked softly, genuine emotion cracking through his carefully maintained facade. "The way your words flow. It's old-fashioned, like books instead of streets," Betty explained with childlike simplicity, happily spreading jam on her toast, while inadvertently forging a deeper connection with their dangerous protector. "It's beautiful, like music with words." August studied the remarkable child with newfound appreciation, witnessing not just her linguistic gift, but her inherent emotional intelligence that somehow perceived the human beneath his carefully constructed armor. "My grandfather would have liked you," he acknowledged with rare warmth, a genuine smile softening his features. Later that morning, August received the first reports of coordinated strikes against Russian operations throughout Philadelphia, his preemptive response to their planned attack disrupting their organization at multiple levels simultaneously. Heather overheard enough to understand the deadly chess game unfolding in their absence, civilians unwittingly moving through streets that had become a battleground for criminal empires. "Is this really your life?" Heather asked quietly, when they found themselves momentarily alone, Betty having been escorted to the library by August's housekeeper. "Constantly fighting, hurting people, living behind walls of security and violence?" August considered her question with surprising thoughtfulness, absently rotating the heavy signet ring that marked his status within his organization. "It's the life I inherited and learned to excel at," he answered honestly, something in Heather's direct gaze compelling his candor where threats would have failed. "And you never wanted something different?" she pressed, unintimidated by his reputation in a way few people had ever been. "Something normal, friends who aren't afraid of you, relationships based on more than power and obligation." A shadow crossed August's face, revealing a glimpse of the path not taken, a vulnerability she hadn't expected from someone so formidable. "What I want stopped mattering a long time ago," he replied, the bitterness in his voice tempered by resignation to choices made years before. The moment of unexpected intimacy was interrupted by August's security chief arriving with crucial intelligence. The Russian leadership had requested an emergency meeting to negotiate terms following the devastating counterattack. The balance of power had shifted decisively, creating an opportunity to end the conflict before more blood was shed. "I should return to the city," August declared, already mentally calculating risks and advantages as he prepared to leverage his strengthened position. "You'll remain here under maximum security until I've confirmed the threat has been permanently resolved." Heather felt an unexpected surge of concern at the thought of August facing his enemies alone, the man who had risked everything to protect her daughter, suddenly seeming strangely vulnerable despite his power. "Be careful," she said simply, surprising herself with the genuine sentiment behind her words. August paused at the doorway, momentarily disarmed by her concern, a foreign experience for someone accustomed to fear or obedience, rather than authentic worry for his welfare. "I always am," he promised, with unexpected gentleness, his gaze lingering on her face before he departed. 3 days passed in tense waiting, the sprawling estate eerily quiet save for security updates, and Betty's cheerful exploration of the extensive library where she discovered books in a dozen languages. Heather found herself constantly checking the driveway, anxiety growing with each passing hour without word from August. "You're worried about him," Betty observed perceptively, curled beside her mother on a window seat overlooking the manicured gardens, where armed guards maintained their vigilant patrol. "I can tell by how you keep looking at the road and checking your phone." Heather sighed, unable to deny the truth in her daughter's assessment, or the confusing emotions developing toward the dangerous man who had upended their lives. "It's complicated, sweetie," she admitted, absently stroking Betty's hair, while wrestling with feelings she hadn't anticipated. The distant rumble of vehicles approaching broke the afternoon stillness, security teams confirming August's arrival via encrypted radio channels, moments before his motorcade appeared through the trees. Heather tried to ignore the relief washing over her as she recognized his tall figure emerging from the lead car, moving with the same confident grace despite visible fatigue. August found them in the library, his normally impeccable appearance slightly rumpled from days of high-stakes negotiation. "It's over," he announced without preamble, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "The Russians have agreed to withdraw from Philadelphia entirely in exchange for certain concessions elsewhere." Betty launched herself forward in a spontaneous hug that momentarily stunned August, his arms awkwardly returning the child's embrace while meeting Heather's gaze over her head. "You came back," Betty stated simply, her trust in him apparently absolute, despite knowing fragments of his dangerous reality. "I promised I would," August replied, something in his expression suggesting the significance of keeping this particular promise extended beyond professional obligation. "And we have arrangements to discuss about your future." Heather tensed, bracing herself for whatever life-altering decisions had been made on their behalf during the power negotiations. "What kind of arrangements?" she asked cautiously, years of struggling alone making her wary of solutions that seemed too convenient. "Legitimate ones," August assured her, correctly interpreting her concerns. "A position at my charitable foundation with housing provided in a secure building, excellent schools for Betty, and protection from my security team, until we're certain no threat remains from former Russian associates." The offer was generous beyond anything Heather could have imagined. Financial security, safety, opportunities for Betty's extraordinary abilities to be nurtured properly. Yet something in August's carefully neutral expression suggested there was more behind the proposal than mere obligation or strategic advantage. "And what do you get from this arrangement?" she questioned directly, unwilling to accept charity regardless of their circumstances. "I'm not interested in being indebted to anyone, no matter how well-intentioned the help might seem." August's expression softened unexpectedly, the calculated businessman momentarily replaced by something more genuine. "Your perspective," he answered honestly, surprising them both. "In 3 days, you've questioned decisions I've made unthinkingly for years, challenged assumptions about what's necessary versus what's merely convenient for maintaining power." Their conversation was interrupted by August's security chief bringing urgent news. FBI agents were investigating connections between recent violence in Philadelphia and established crime families, focusing particularly on August's organization, despite his careful maintenance of legitimate business fronts for decades. "We need to accelerate the separation of my legitimate enterprises from the other operations," August declared, already formulating contingency plans. "Starting with the foundation where Heather will be working, it needs to be completely clean, beyond reproach or suspicion." Betty, who had been quietly observing the adults from her corner of the library sofa, suddenly spoke up with characteristic directness. "You should just stop doing the bad things completely," she suggested, her childlike moral clarity cutting through complex justifications with devastating simplicity. August stared at her for a long moment, something profound shifting behind his eyes, as he considered her words without immediate dismissal. "It's not quite that simple when you've lived this life as long as I have," he explained gently, without the condescension adults typically offered children discussing complex issues. "Why not?" Betty persisted, her innocent question containing a challenge that centuries of moral philosophy had struggled to answer satisfactorily. "If you know something is wrong, you stop doing it. That's what Mom always teaches me." Heather watched a silent transformation occur as August considered Betty's question with unexpected seriousness. The hardened crime boss confronted with essential truth delivered through a child's uncompromising perspective. "Your daughter might be wiser than all my advisors combined," he acknowledged with a rueful smile. The next morning brought another surprise, as August presented his comprehensive transition plan: a strategic withdrawal from illicit operations, consolidation of legitimate businesses, and careful negotiation with rival organizations to maintain stability during the power shift. The blueprint for transformation, that would have seemed impossible days earlier now, lay methodically outlined on his desk. "It won't happen overnight," August cautioned, realistic about the challenges ahead, despite his newfound determination. "Some operations can't simply be abandoned without consequences. People depend on the protection and employment we provide, regardless of legality." Heather nodded, recognizing the complexity of extracting oneself from systems built over generations, appreciating his honesty where empty promises would have been easier. "But you're actually going to try," she observed, the statement somewhere between question and acknowledgement of the significant shift in his thinking. Autumn leaves danced across the courtyard of the secure apartment complex where Heather and Betty had lived for the past month under August's protection. Their new home blended elegant comfort with subtle security features, allowing a semblance of normalcy while maintaining vigilance. Betty thrived at her new private school, where her extraordinary linguistic abilities earned admiration from teachers who believed she was merely a dedicated polyglot. The trauma of that fateful gala night had faded somewhat, replaced by excitement of educational opportunities her mother could never have afforded before. Heather found unexpected fulfillment in her foundation work, her practical experience helping struggling families, bringing authentic perspective to programs. August visited weekly, ostensibly for foundation business, but increasingly lingering for conversations that stretched late into evening after Betty had gone to bed. The delicate peace shattered one Tuesday afternoon when Heather received an urgent call from Betty's school. Her daughter never arrived for afternoon classes. Security footage showed a maintenance van with false credentials approaching the playground before the recording mysteriously terminated. August arrived within minutes of Heather's panicked call, the normally composed crime boss radiating controlled fury as he mobilized every resource at his disposal. "We'll find her," he promised, gripping Heather's shoulders with fierce determination, while his security team established a command center. "It's the Belarusian faction," August's intelligence chief confirmed, after tracking the maintenance van through traffic cameras. "They're attempting to position themselves as successors to the Russians we forced out, proving their reach by targeting those under your direct protection." A phone call came through on Heather's personal number. Untraceable, the caller speaking fluent Sicilian with deliberate clarity intended for Betty to understand. "Your daughter is unharmed for now," the accented voice stated coldly. "She will remain so if Corvino abandons his territories east of Broad Street by midnight." August's expression remained impassive during the call played on speaker, only the whitening of his knuckles betraying the rage building beneath his controlled exterior. "They've made two critical mistakes," he stated with deadly calm once the connection terminated, "underestimating how far I'll go to protect what's mine." Betty sat alone in a windowless room, her inherent bravery wavering as hours passed with only brief visits from masked men speaking various languages. Her small fingers traced patterns on the concrete floor, forming words in different alphabets as she mentally cataloged everything she heard. Across the city, August operated with cold precision unlike anything Heather had witnessed before, leveraging decades of underworld connections and calling in favors from unlikely allies. The hunt narrowed to abandoned industrial properties along the Delaware River waterfront, satellite imagery eliminating possibilities one by one. "I'm coming with you," Heather insisted when the assault team prepared to move, her expression brooking no argument despite August's immediate objection. "She's my daughter, and she'll be terrified. She needs to see me first, not armed men she doesn't recognize." August recognized the unshakable determination in her eyes, the same fierce protectiveness he'd witnessed at their first meeting, and nodded tersely, instructing his security chief to equip her with a bulletproof vest. His personal concern extended beyond strategic considerations in ways neither acknowledged directly. The warehouse loomed dark against the night sky, seemingly abandoned but for subtle indicators of recent activity detected by thermal imaging drones deployed moments before their arrival. August's team moved with practiced efficiency, disabling perimeter security systems with silent precision. Heather's heart pounded painfully as she waited in the reinforced vehicle, watching August check his weapon with mechanical efficiency, before meeting her gaze with unexpected gentleness. "I'm bringing her back to you," he promised quietly, the words carrying weight beyond professional obligation. The warehouse extraction succeeded beyond expectation. August's team recovered Betty unharmed, while capturing key members of the Belarusian organization. Betty showed remarkable composure throughout, providing crucial intelligence about conversations she had overheard during her captivity. "They have someone inside your security team," she reported solemnly once safely home, her small hand clutching her mother's while maintaining unwavering eye contact with August. The tall man with the scar spoke on the phone about getting regular updates from someone called Wraith. August's expression darkened dangerously, the betrayal cutting deep after years built on loyalty and shared history within his organization. "You're absolutely certain about this?" he asked gently, careful not to pressure the child despite the critical implications of her revelation. Betty nodded without hesitation, her reliability as a witness bolstered by her perfect recall of conversations in multiple languages that perfectly corroborated intelligence gathered through other channels. August exchanged meaningful glances with his security chief, silent communication flowing between them. The following weeks brought dramatic changes as August accelerated his transition plan, systematically dismantling criminal operations while strengthening legitimate businesses. The betrayal had catalyzed his determination to create something that wouldn't require constant vigilance against enemies. Heather found herself increasingly involved in strategic discussions, her practical perspective and ethical clarity providing balance to August's pragmatic efficiency. Late-night planning sessions in her apartment became commonplace, Betty often falling asleep on the sofa while the adults talked. "Why are you really doing this?" Heather asked one evening after Betty had been tucked into bed, the question hanging between them as autumn rain tapped gently against windows. "The truth, August, not the practical justifications you explained to your lieutenants." August considered her question with characteristic thoughtfulness, absently rotating the signet ring that symbolized generations of family power. "Initially, survival, adapting to changing circumstances," he admitted, his gaze fixed on distant memories. "But now, something different, something I haven't felt entitled to consider since I was very young." The unspoken connection between them intensified in the comfortable silence that followed, neither rushing to define the gradual transformation of their relationship from reluctant allies to something more complex. August found himself sharing childhood stories he'd buried decades ago. "It's not too late to choose differently," Heather suggested softly, her hand finding his across the table in a gesture of support rather than romance, though the distinction grew increasingly blurred. "You've built something powerful. Why not redirect it completely toward something you can be proud of?" The tender moment shattered when August's phone buzzed with urgent news. Federal indictments were being prepared against his organization based on evidence supplied by a confidential informant. The betrayal extended beyond his security team into law enforcement circles he'd believed secure. "You need to distance yourself from me immediately," August declared, already calculating contingencies as he prepared to leave. "The foundation, your position, Betty's school, all legitimate, all protected if my legal troubles don't contaminate them through association." Heather caught his arm as he rose, her expression fierce with determination matching his own. "We're not disposable assets you can reallocate when circumstances change," she challenged, the first time she'd directly confronted his habit of unilateral decision-making. August stared at her in momentary shock before unexpected laughter broke through his tension, genuine amusement at being so thoroughly called out. "You're right," he conceded, resuming his seat with newfound respect. "What do you suggest?" Their collaborative solution emerged through hours of discussion: accelerated legal separation of legitimate businesses, strategic cooperation with specific law enforcement agencies, and careful documentation of August's active transition away from criminal activities. The federal courthouse steps swarmed with reporters when August emerged, following his testimony against the Belarusian organization, his immunity deal contingent upon comprehensive information about rival criminal enterprises rather than his own operations. Photographers captured his composed expression as he navigated the media gauntlet. "The vultures are loving this," remarked Special Agent Bryce, the pragmatic FBI veteran who had constructed August's controversial cooperation agreement against significant internal opposition. Former crime boss destroying competitors while reinventing himself as a corporate philanthropist. "It's either the best redemption story in Philadelphia history or the most elaborate criminal evolution." August maintained his diplomatic smile for the cameras while mentally calculating the strategic advantages gained through selective cooperation, protection for his legitimate businesses, established relationships with law enforcement, and most importantly, safety for Heather and Betty. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, August's Charitable Foundation hosted its annual fundraiser in the same ballroom where Betty had first saved his life. The event showcased impressive results from community programs designed with Heather's input, educational initiatives, housing assistance, and employment opportunities. Betty circulated confidently among guests in her new role as unofficial language ambassador, impressing international donors with conversation in their native tongues, while carefully maintaining the cover story that she studied languages conventionally. At 11 years old, she understood the importance of protecting her ability from those who might exploit it. "She's remarkable," August observed, watching Betty charm a Japanese technology magnate with perfect linguistic etiquette that bridged cultural barriers effortlessly. Not just the languages, but her resilience through everything that's happened. "She gets that from you," Heather accepted the compliment with a gentle smile, her hand resting comfortably in the crook of August's arm in a public acknowledgement of their evolving relationship. "And her strategic thinking comes from spending too much time around you," she countered affectionately. The evening reached its pinnacle when August took the stage for his keynote address, the former shadow power now stepping fully into public leadership, with carefully curated transparency about his business evolution. "Second chances aren't given. They're created through deliberate choices and consistent actions that demonstrate genuine change," he stated. Across the city, the final phase of August's transformation unfolded simultaneously, his remaining lieutenants implementing the complete dissolution of criminal operations following months of careful preparation. Properties transferred to community development corporations, illicit income streams redirected to legitimate ventures. August considered the observation thoughtfully, memories of his intimidating father momentarily shadowing his expression. "He built what he knew how to build in the world he understood," he replied without judgment. "We're living in a different world with different possibilities. Adapting is just good business." Later that evening, August found quiet moment with Heather on the ballroom terrace, the city lights spreading below them like a reflection of the stars above. "I received the final paperwork today. All criminal operations officially terminated. Remaining assets transferred to legitimate holdings," he revealed quietly. Heather studied his profile in the moonlight, noting the lightness that had gradually replaced the constant vigilance he once carried. "Regrets?" she asked gently, understanding the magnitude of abandoning an identity and power structure that had defined his existence since childhood. August turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his with unexpected vulnerability. "Only the wasted years before Betty's extraordinary gift brought you both into my life," he admitted, the hardened crime boss completely transformed by love that had grown steadily through shared challenges. The Foundation Gala concluded with unprecedented fundraising success, corporate partnerships established, and political connections solidified, as August's reinvention gained widespread acceptance among Philadelphia's elite. The narrative of redemption proved compelling to a society eager for positive transformation stories. Betty yawned as they rode home in August's car, her head nodding against her mother's shoulder after the excitement of the evening. "Are we a real family now?" she asked sleepily, the innocent question piercing straight to the heart of what had developed between the adults over months. 1 year to the day after their lives intersected so dramatically, August knelt in the private garden of his transformed estate, holding a simple platinum ring that represented not ownership, but partnership between equals. "I can't promise a normal life," he acknowledged honestly, "but I can promise every resource I possess will be dedicated to your happiness." The intimate wedding took place in the same garden weeks later, attended only by Betty and their closest allies from both worlds. Betty performed her proudest role as translator for August's elderly Sicilian relatives, her gift bringing together disparate parts of their unusual family. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, as your support is important for me to continue creating content here.